everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Minds of Mortgage podcast. I am Kelly Yale, and today I am highlighting yet another woman in this industry who I have so much respect for. It is Laura Brandao. She is the CEO of Lighthouse Advisors, which is a national consulting firm which helps, really specializes in executive leadership, strategic growth, the things that are so important to people today. She is a nationally recognized speaker, and she is a tireless industry advocate, and she genuinely wants to lead with purpose, to create a positive, lasting impact. She is someone who you have definitely seen on stages, you've for sure seen on LinkedIn. But Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Kelly, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Friend, I would love to know, this is kind of the first question I usually ask because it's so fascinating to me. How did you end up in the mortgage industry?
So, my origin story. I love this question because I'm fascinated by people's origin story. My origin story is I met my husband in high school. We were high school sweethearts. We got married when I was 19 years old, and we had our first son 2 weeks before my 20th birthday. So here we are, a very young couple with not an idea of what we're going to do. And for the first year, my husband worked. I stayed home with the baby. And after that time, I was like, I need more. I need stimulation. I need to do something. But I didn't want to leave the child. So I did something at night. And at that time, I went and applied for a job in a marketing company. And I use this as one of my stories that I share on stages because in that moment, sitting across from the person that was interviewing me, they said to me, Laura, we have two jobs open. We have one job where you can wait for the phone to ring and it's like a customer service job, or we have a second job. That job is calling people for different campaigns, right? And I said, oh, well, that was easy. I don't want to wait for anyone to call me. I want to control my destiny and I want to pick up the phone. I chose to cold call people. That was what that decision was. And the campaign was mortgage.
So great. I love that. So when you were first, because I find call reluctance to be one of the most fascinating parts of our industry. Obviously we've seen different waves where that's incredibly important, but you do see call reluctance. People are afraid to pick up the phone. People are afraid to talk on the phone. Do you see that as well?
I do. And I mention all the time when as I went through my career and start to build companies, I would say to people that one of the greatest skills I ever learned was that.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I don't pick up, when I was cold calling people to try to generate leads for a mortgage company, I didn't go in trying to think of how do I get this person to give me their, no joke, Kelly. Back then, you asked people for their social security number over the phone.
On
Oh
the
my
landline.
goodness. On a landline. I mean, craziness, right? But I didn't go into it saying, oh, how do I convince this person to do this? I went into it of this person that doesn't know me, that's not expecting this phone call, probably at dinner time, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
calling in the evening. I had to make it so that I provided value in their life. And that value, which is one of my signatures, that's still to this day, my energy. I am very high energy. And when I get on the phone with someone, they smile. They actually feel good when they're speaking to me. So I just thought to myself, what currency can I share with this stranger to make it so that I've improved their moment in time? And that philosophy still applies
Yeah.
today.
It absolutely does. And I mean, that's, you and I are very aligned in the way that we think about relationship creation and the way to sort of bring that energy to something. You're totally correct that, you can't just pick up the phone and say, I don't know how Consumer Direct does it, right? Because I've been in so many, as I'm sure you have, consulting with
Yep.
Consumer Direct. And and it's always what I say. It's like, great. Imagine you're picking up the phone, though. Don't think about what you're going to say and all these things and stand in your circles and pitch to each other. Think about for a second if you're picking up the phone, right? What is this person going to provide that's a solution for my life, and how are they approaching that conversation so that I feel respected and heard, right?
Exactly.
You're essentially a forward thinking consumer direct social security number taking salesperson. How did you go from that seat and that role to being like a full-time originator?
Oh, this is fun. No, this is fun. Okay. So now here I am. I'm 21 years old. Okay. I'm calling people and getting this because it was a refi boom at that time,
Yeah.
right? So it was exact again, you're just calling people to try to lower the rate. And I get this idea. Turn to my husband. I'm like, we want to own a home one day, right? Like we're living in an apartment. We want to have a home. And my husband's like, sure, Laura, like we're making like $7 an hour. Like, how are we owning a home? You know what I mean? What are we doing? And so I decide I'm going to go and ask the VP of the marketing company how I can possibly get more hours to work to save to buying a home. So one day I just go and knock on the door with no appointment, or he doesn't know who I am. I knock on the door, and this 55-year-old, guy in a suit, all buttoned up, looks up to me and sees this young girl standing in the doorway. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, hey, I'm Laura Brandao. I'm one of your telemarketers at night. And he's like, okay. I'm like, I want to save to buy a house, and I'm looking for some additional hours. So he says to me, Laura, why don't you stay late? You can run some reports, on our marketing campaigns that we run at night, and that'll give you a couple extra hours. So I'm like, solid. I'll do it. No problem. I'll stay late. Well, that night, Kelly, again, pivotal moment in my life that changed everything. That night I stayed late. I printed the reports, but I didn't stop there. I sat down and I analyzed every conversion. I looked at the call times. I looked at who was on what campaign, because this was a full marketing company. It wasn't just mortgage. So you could be working on something about music or something about, different campaigns. And then I wrote up a strategy. I literally said, you should move Kelly to this campaign and you should move Bob to that campaign. And I made copies of it and slipped it under the door of every executive at the marketing company. So the next day I arrive for my shift, and that man is waiting for me. And I'm thinking I'm getting fired. Like, I literally thought to myself, okay, that was fun. He said to me, Laura, why did you do that? And I said, well, you guys don't work at night. You have no idea who these people are. I said, but I know these people and I know where to place them to make you better sales and conversion. Kelly, he handed me the entire division. I was promoted at that moment to take over the entire night shift, running like 300 telemarketers on the floor, all because of that one decision I did. Well, I stayed there for a few years until I had another child. And once my kids were ready to go to school, I didn't want to work at night anymore. I went and got a job in the mortgage industry. And that was how the trek went into mortgage.
What year was that?
90s. That is mid 90s.
I have never had a conversation with anyone in mortgage who was thinking like that then. Not one person.
Oh.
When I got in 2012, I still didn't know anybody who was having that conversation. And I was like, what? Hold on, because I owned a marketing company. So ironic, right?
Oh.
So I owned a marketing company and took a mortgage company on as a client, and I did the exact same thing. I was like, but 1 + 1 = 2. And then I was like, what about this? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, it's always equal 2. I'm not really sure how we didn't do this, but that thinking was so radical then. I can't fathom what it would be to a company to back in the 90s or during any.
This is before everything was computerized. Yes. This was before like any of that. Nobody analyzed data. Nobody did strategic planning like that. So you're right. And honestly, to this day, I cannot even tell you what made me think to do it. Because it wasn't like I had a mentor that was like, Laura, one day when you have an opportunity, I can't even tell you where it came from more than my heart believed that I could put, let's use you as the example. I could put Kelly in a better position if I moved her over to this educational campaign because Kelly is a teacher during the day. So I knew it would be better for you. And then in turn, I knew it would be better for the company to get more production and profit from you. So it was really more of how do I help Kelly and the company?
Yes. I can't I I can't say how important I find that. I'm gonna ask you an awkward question. It's 2025.
Correct.
Realistically, how many companies are doing it right now?
I know.
And that's really, I think, the thing that just is stunning to me because I did it at scale to millions of people, right? So
Yeah.
when we built our platform, it was we had millions of records, and people have a really hard time understanding that, I would know if Laura's credit score fell under a certain number because it would then be the system's job to teach her how to build positive credit, and then it would be data monitoring to let me know when the credit had gone up. And by the time that person that was originally talked to by the loan officer maybe 16 months ago had been through all of this different curation, and when they're finally ready to have this like this celebration, that's when I would ping the loan officer. I didn't ask my loan officers to figure out this
No.
huge Rubik's cube of things. And what's so striking to me is that was so many years ago. And now in 2025, sometimes I'll write like a newsletter and I'll put it out, and people are like, well, how do you do that? Or like, gosh, I wish our company would do that. And I think I'm not really sure why we're not all doing that
Yeah.
now. It's surprising to me just because we have so much actionable
We
data.
do.
It's not like it was in the 90s where you're like, okay, I can see this user record and see this is a teacher, so I know I have to do XYZ because tech does.
You had to actually use your brain then.
Right?
Like you couldn't even automate it, right?
No. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's so impressive. You also brought up another thing. Again, I'm going to ask you a tricky question. Um, you mentioned that you didn't have a mentor who was showing you, that you were simply using your own bravery and talent to make a bold move that it actually ended up super impacting you. But when it comes to mentors, did you have a really good mentor in mortgage?
So great question. And I almost attribute that earliness to being naive. I honestly didn't know what I didn't know, and no one
Mm-hmm.
had told me. No one ever said, Laura, who the heck are you to go to the VP of the marketing company? Like, you don't have the authority or the
Right.
level to do that. No one ever told me I couldn't. So in my brain, I'm like, why can't I? Right? I got to go right to the source. Why do I need to go through middlemen? Now, maybe that was great, right? That I had that, I was so naive that it worked to my advantage. Okay, so fast forward. Yes, so it's very interesting. I got into mortgage, I was working at a mortgage company, and then believe it or not, the mortgage industry is all cycles. The first cycle I ever saw was towards the end of the 90s. There was actually a downturn in the market.
Okay.
Now, because I was just in the industry, I was like, maybe I'm going to exit this industry and I'm going to go do something else. So I actually jumped out of the mortgage industry for a couple of years, did something else. And then right before September 11th, like a couple months before September 11th, I came back. And I can always remember, speaking of the mentor, I came for a job interview and it was for running a sales, like an inside sales team, right? So, which was my background, right? So I'm like, I could do this job, all right. And I remember sitting across the table from a woman that was probably my age now. Okay, so now I'm the young lady and she's me, right? So she's really experienced, has done all this great stuff in the industry, right? And I remember I turned to her and I said, I know there's a way to be really successful in this industry, but I have not figured out how to do it. I said, I don't know if it's just because I haven't partnered with the right company or somebody hasn't showed me the way. I said, but I got to be honest. I know there's a way to do it. If someone would just show me the path. And she said, Laura, I will show you the path.
Wow.
And that woman, I worked with her, let's see, '01 to '07 when I started AFR Wholesale. So for 6 years, that woman would say, you don't do this. Yeah, a matter of fact, I'll give you a funny story. I have one negative thing that a habit. I have one negative habit, which is I bit my nails. So here I am, this young woman, and I bit my nails. That was my one nervous thing that I did. And I'll never forget her going, honey, you got to be put together if you're going to be a woman leader. The nails need to be nice. The hair's got to be great. You got to have it together, honey. And I'll never forget that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And to this day, I still have that in my brain all these years later. And that woman guided me from how to show up, how to speak, when to speak up, when to keep quiet, when to push forward. And she was the person that taught me wholesale. That was how I learned wholesale, that got me to build out a company to become a top 10 national wholesale lender, all because of that mentor.
I am so jealous. I don't want to turn green, but I'm so jealous. I can't even begin to tell you, because now I realize, I mean, you and I are both such passionate mentors for women,
Yeah.
right? If give us a chance. I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, it doesn't even matter if you're in mortgage or not. If you are a
Agree.
young woman in business and you need a half an hour of my time, I'll send you my link
Me too.
in a minute. But mine comes from the absolute lack of mentorship, and yours comes from being blessed with great mentorship. And I think that's extraordinary. And I think both have obviously a role, but I can't even imagine someone taking me under their wing. I was like a little lost puppy all the time. I didn't know there were two G's in mortgage. I just had all the ideas in the world, and I was just like, who wants to adopt me? And everyone's like, we're full. The inn is full, ma'am.
Oh.
And so like it's funny how it's so interesting to me how we are kind of raised in this industry, right? But I'm always quasi jealous, but also so grateful when someone's got a great female mentorship story. Like I love that for you, and for people who the blessing of her mentorship has come through you, right?
Correct. And
And that's,
pass it along.
you
Mhm.
teach you teach the teacher. It's
That's
so
right.
good. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. When you're looking around the industry, how have you seen it change in terms of women in leadership? I mean, obviously the fact that there are more women in leadership, but like how have you seen that change, that path?
So it's very interesting. Now we're going through my career journey. Okay, so I go and then I start my wholesale company, and I got to be honest, from when I started that wholesale company up until 2018, I was head down. I was building a company. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't see anybody but my company, right? So head down. So, of course, I was the only woman that had ownership. I was the only woman at the executive table. Every boardroom was me and all the guys, right? I mean, and that was normal to my world.
Mhm.
I really didn't even know if anything else existed. And then in 2018, first margin compression, like my first experience of, oh boy, margin compression, not fun. So I got to think of, how do I get more business, right? Because you're making so much less on these loans. And I get my first opportunity to speak. I get up on a stage, first time ever, 2018. I have a line of women waiting to speak to me after. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I didn't even know what was happening. And they said, Laura, we don't see women leaders on stages. Kelly, that was where the mentorship for me kicked in, that I said, oh my God, I know I've been heads down. I know I've been doing what I'm doing, but we have to make a change. And we have to be diligent about this change. And that's when I really like started making all these women's groups and being part of these women's groups and really being active, because we owe it to continue to grow that. Now, in my perspective, it has gotten better. I
Mhm.
think we've made huge improvement, but me and you both know it's got a long way to go.
I used to
So,
I used to describe mortgage technology as I'm the only woman who sits at any table I'm at. Because if I'm in a tech meeting, it's all men and me. If I'm in a mortgage meeting, it's all men and me. It was a very strange thing to experience coming from sort of a different background, to be in that situation. And I'll
yeah.
never forget, we did a project with Cloud Virga, and this is at the very beginning of Cloud Virga. And there was this woman named Rupa who was on their team, on their executive team. And I remember the first time I came into the room and she was sitting there, and I felt so happy. It almost
Yeah.
brought me to tears. And I was like, this is so ridiculous. Why should this be so monumental to me? But I don't think I'd ever really, like, it'd always been sort of a joke, for me,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Me too.
when I saw the woman at the table, I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't want it to be like that. We shouldn't notice if
No,
there's men or women or,
we should not notice it.
but obviously when you're in a little bit of a drought with it, it can be, very something that you notice. And I agree that it's gotten better. I especially, where I also noticed it was there, it seemed for a long time that men were the salespeople and women were in
Ops.
ops.
Mhm.
And I what where that bothered me was when you did have compression, or when we did have, down cycles, it was always sort of ops that got the axe first too, and that also seemed really to bother me.
I agree.
You
I
know.
and it's something, again, I didn't even have the awareness at certain points in my career because I was so entrenched in it.
Mhm.
And I encourage everyone out there to have the awareness. We have to keep our eyes and our ears and our awareness open, because that's the first step. Because and I'll give you examples. People know now, like organizations that I'm part of. Let's just use MBA New Jersey as an example. I sit on the board. When I first came to be on the board, great group of people, obviously a lot of guys on the board. I wasn't the only woman, but there was a small number of us. And until I arrived and said, you got a whole panel full of men. Like, you think maybe we could put a woman executive up there? You think maybe? And it was never that they intentionally didn't want to put the women.
Right.
It was never that they thought about it. It's just, oh, let's put Steve and Joe and Bill and whatever. It wasn't anything intentional. It was awareness. And I can tell you now, it's not even a thought. It's always, okay, we gotta make sure that we're even, not because they're trying to be politically correct, just because of the awareness. And that's what we all need to have. We have to be aware. So to your point, it doesn't just have to be women in operations, right? It doesn't just have to be operations that goes when it's time to right size something, right? Or when those executive roles are open, let's make sure that maybe just because somebody doesn't have as big of a voice, that doesn't mean they're not the right person for the role, right? Maybe they're just not as vocal about it. So that awareness is the first step.
I totally agree. It's really awareness. No one ever, I don't think anyone's ever been
No,
purposeful in any sort of negative way. I
no,
think it just is the way the industry was, and it
yeah,
takes a long time for some things to change. But I also noticed that, the people who are sort of most vocal about changing it are typically people who are not inside a large company. Like a lot of us are consultants, or a lot of,
yep.
that kind of thing. And I noticed there's not a lot of boat rocking still. And I think to myself, like, well, sometimes people who are, not everyone's going to slip the manifesto under the door. You know what I mean?
No.
No one's going to go full Jerry Maguire all the time. But you and I are so passionate about inspiring exactly that, right? And
Yes.
it's not, I don't look at it like, oh gosh, there's not enough girls on the playground. I just think to myself, how can we give some gifts? How do we always reach down the ladder, to make sure that everyone just kind of has the same opportunities, and can really be successful in something that they're passionate about doing.
It's funny. This week, I was part of an interview process of hiring someone for one of my clients, a mortgage company. And I get into a room with a gentleman, 26 years old, has a finance and marketing degree. And he's coming into the mortgage world, doesn't know anything about mortgage, right? And I'm having this conversation as to what he's looking for and what has he learned so far in his career, with little jobs he's had. And we wound up hiring him. He's phenomenal. Like, I know he's going to do well. And I sat there thinking about this, and I'm like, I just opened the door to a young gentleman that the world is his oyster right now, that we're going to pour into, and we're going to teach him, and we're going to guide him, and his life will never be the same again.
Yeah.
And Kelly, that's why.
Oh, for sure.
That's why.
Give me an army of give me 1,000 loan officers who are under the age of 30 who have a finance and marketing degree.
Yep.
Give me
Let's go.
keys to that company. I assure you, we are going to make some money at that company. And it's not for any reason. It's not to be ageist, but to be honest with you, like, I just find the people who are newer to the industry, let's say they've been in for the last 5 years or so, they've experienced this, last 5 years has been what it's been. Yeah. But the way that they look at it is so different, right? They're not waiting for the next cycle to hit. They're not waiting for the world to go back to the way it was, because they understand that there is a very different world afoot. And if you are going to be, kind of train yourself in that world, you're going to have a significant career.
Right. Exactly.
I agree. Well, this is interesting because so my next question really is, like, when you look at origination this year, there are obviously so many challenges, but what do you see as sort of the common denominator in challenge? Like, what is the one thing that you think that people are kind of struggling with most?
I mean, to your point, one thing is getting out of their head that people are comparing today to anything else that they ever experienced.
Yeah.
And you can't. You cannot take this moment in time and compare it to anything that you have experienced. So people are doing that comparison and feeling negative about the result because they're comparing two things that are nowhere near the same. So the first thing is you gotta get out of your head. You gotta get out of your head to realize that it's never going to be the same as it was. Okay, yep. So that's one. Number two, I wish I could think of the number of times I have said to my husband me and my husband are still married, all that 19-year-old girl, so we're still married all these years later, happily married. And I say to my husband on a daily basis, no joke, like I can picture last night me saying it, Tony, I love being alive in 2025 in business. Want to know why? We are so blessed with the tools that we have, that we can sit here and pull up every piece of information and every answer to every question and every crazy thought that I can come up with. I can execute it and get it done faster, more efficient, and more effectively than any other time in history. So the first thing is to stop comparing. The second thing is number one, and not the challenge part, but in the positive, realize the gift we have of the time we're in right now. Because you, as a loan originator, have the ability to build relationships. That is your differentiator. The problem is that we expect things to happen so quickly now because we live in an instant gratification. It's not happening. It goes back to that mind again. Stop thinking you're failing if things aren't happening instantly. You're in it for the long road. You're planting your seeds. So you got to figure out how to put your big girl and big boy pants on and figure out every single day, this is what I'm planting today. I'm planting this today. I'm planting that tomorrow. And then I'm going back and I'm going to reap it and I'm going to water and I'm going to do all this stuff because you're in it for the long haul. You are a mortgage professional. You are not in it for today. You're in it for the long.
I say it all the time, but I usually use Tinder as my analogy.
Okay. Okay.
I'm like, you just like you think you're gonna swipe and that's it,
You're
right?
not.
Now you're together forever, or now you're together for the day, or whatever it is. You think this is how it goes. See you, yep, okay, perfect. Now we have a transaction. What happened to going to dinner? What happened to getting to know someone? This mentality that like I'm
It's
gonna
the
get a referral
instant.
and it's
It's the
gonna
instant
yes.
gratification.
We have to wait for people at length to find the house that they really want. We have to put investment into a first time home buyer 2 years before they're ready to buy that
Yes,
house.
that's right.
Because the idea is not how am I going to get paid tomorrow? It is how am I going to further my career via this maturing, curating pipeline that I'm going to have, right? Because it's cannot be instant gratification anymore. And I remember so clearly being in this crazy world in 2019 where the system was producing loan opportunities 500, 700, 1,000 loan opportunities per week that were being absolutely ignored
I know.
because there was so much business.
I remember.
And you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I was frightened at that time because I thought it was going to be a brand impact problem and I
Yeah.
couldn't give those leads, or not even leads, they're not leads, they're loans. I
Yeah.
couldn't give loans to other people because they were all based on this, this automated relationship that has been created between the originator and this human being over time. But now we would sell our soul
Right.
for three.
You're right.
And so if we're looking at it but if we're looking at it the same way, right, which is maybe you just get 3 opportunities for this entire month, right?
Yeah.
You got to take really good care of
My
those people.
goodness.
And then you've got to really think about how do I get the next three in line?
Yeah.
And like you said, even the stuff that's boring, even the cold calls, even everything, how are you going to show up today to do the hard work? I mean, I 1000% wish we were in the old world too. Don't get me wrong. All of our budgets have been cut. All of our
Of
things have
course.
been cut.
Yeah.
We all want to get in the DeLorean and go back in time. But what if we can't, then how do we go to the future? What does it mean to think about what am I thinking about for June, for July, for August? What relationships can I create? How can I become more involved in my community? How can I reach out to my past database? What are the things that I can offer as a human being to lean in to make somebody else's life a little bit better?
But Kelly, how few people are doing any of what you just said?
Oh,
How few?
it's
And if they're doing one of them, it's one. They're not doing all five, right?
yeah. There's a gent I know, I don't even know, where he's on LinkedIn, and I couldn't even come up with his name if he gave me $1 million. Not, it's just, I've just been a casual observer of this gentleman. And he, for the last year, has posted how many outbound phone calls he makes per day and what happens from those phone calls. It has just been such a cool thing. I should look him up. I should look him up and have him on the podcast.
You should. That's a good conversation.
Right? So
does he do it for his accountability? Like, is the purpose like he's going to hold himself accountable?
I think he wanted to prove the point that picking up the phone still has power, and also to a certain extent the accountability, and also just kind of showing people, hey, not one person answered a call today.
Right.
It's a zero-sum game. Tomorrow, maybe he gets 2 referrals that don't even turn out. But what he's doing in real time is showing people, I'm showing up and I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm showing up.
And it's interesting to me to be back kind of in this space where, and it shouldn't be like this, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it almost feels like as through the teens, right, that salespeople got very accustomed to multiple LOAs and having free time and making what they wanted to make. And I think people kind of felt demoted a little.
But that goes back to here, right?
100%.
What's in your brain? Like, how are you perceiving that? You're correct.
You don't have to spend $1,000 on 6 realtors going golfing on a Friday to make the same kind of impact that you can going to volunteer with that person or going to the gym with that person. you're going to get the same kind of quality time. We might not be able to wine them and dine them the same way, but did they like you better then?
So I was listening to a podcast with Seth Godin
Hmm.
yesterday, right? And I love listening to him. He makes me laugh, right?
Yeah.
And he said something that I'm going to tell you kind of hit me, right? And I'm going to share this because this all ties together. And he was speaking about what is marketing, right? And what is the best marketing that you could do at with whatever you're selling, right? Whatever that is. And he said, it's not about like how many times you're hitting someone, like connecting, marketing to someone. He goes, it's all about being remarkable.
Hmm.
And this is the part I need everyone to hear. He said, do you want to know what remarkable is? And so the guy's listening to him. And he said, it's doing something so special or in such an impactful way that someone else will make a remark about you.
Hmm.
Think about that.
Yeah.
So instead of us worrying about the $1,000 take to golf on Friday, why don't we think about how to be so remarkable in our communities, to our past clients, to our realtors, to whatever? Why not just focus on how can I leave such an incredible impact and remarkability on that to where they share you with others? That
That's
is marketing.
It's an incredible place to end, my friend. I love your words of wisdom. Laura Brandao, she is the CEO of Lighthouse Advisors. I will tag her into all of these things. Connect with her on LinkedIn if for no other reason than we should all just be passionate advocates of this new way of thinking, right? Which is just how do I show up, create such huge advocates of me that other people are out there selling me, that other people are like, you gotta talk to this person. So good. I love it, friend. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Pleasure, Kelly. Thank you so much and keep shining brightly, my friend.
Yes, ma'am. I will sure will. Thanks so much.